And we're back. Hey guys, and welcome to the Wazari Ippon podcast. I'm Pathfinder, and I'm here as always with IchigekixEdge, Chris.
What's up, Path? Long time no speak. How are you, man?
I'm good. I'm still on the road doing this from a hotel again. But, it's World Tournament season, so we definitely had to get together and talk about all the things going on. It's been an absolutely insane tournament season. We've already gotten through the Shin Kyokushin, the Shidokan, and the IKO World Tournament still to come. And as you know, it only comes once every 4 years. So this is a big year for Kyokushin. So had to make sure we at least talked about some of this stuff. And I know you were telling me just before we started that someone you'd interviewed for our interview series actually competed in the Shidokan World Tournament.
Yeah, so my friend Ben, who was a guest host on the show back in June, he is from Arjuken Karate in Perth, Australia, and he actually won two world titles today. It's November 5th that we're recording at the Shidokan World Tournament in Japan. So he won the uh, a title, a world championship in Kyokushin rules, so knockdown rules, and then he also won um, a world title in Shidokan rules. So which I don't think it's the triathlon, but I think it's um, that they allow for clinching and some sort of grabbing or throwing or something like that. Definitely not allowed within Kyokushin rules. So just want to congratulate Ben, and I know he was working very hard uh, towards that goal, and I'm so very happy to hear that he won. Um, so speaking of Japan, I am actually getting ready to leave for Japan myself this week. I'm leaving on Friday night or the morning of, or like midnight, Saturday morning, the 11th, to go to Japan on vacation for 2 weeks. So when I'm there, I'll obviously I'm going for the IKO World Tournament and to support my friends who we'll talk about later. Um, but I'll also be taking pictures and going around different dojo for my blog, for the Dojo Explorer blog, where I profile different martial arts schools here in New York, in America, and Japan, or wherever I end up around the world. So that's a side project I do on my own. So I encourage you to go to dojoexplorer.com for the blog itself and to follow me on Instagram at dojo_explorer. I'm more active on Instagram, posting pictures than I am the blog itself, unfortunately, lately. But I promise I'll pick it back up shortly. So yeah, those are all my plugs, Path. So um, should we get right into talking about, or I guess I could talk about it briefly, was also this weekend was the Ashihara World Tournament. I think it was near Nagoya or something like that. Um, and so Ashihara, of course, is another offshoot of Kyokushin karate, where they allow for where they emphasize sabaki. So like um, sidestepping, off balancing your opponents. You can grab the gi and the sleeve a little bit and use it to your advantage to kick your opponent or to trip them and stuff like that. Um, I had like another Instagram mutual who was from Hong Kong actually, but now lives in Canada. Angus, who fought at the Ashihara World Tournament, and he had a couple fights, and I think he did well. So, just want to congratulate that and talk about, um, or at least mention it, because it does fall within this full contact world. So yeah, and then like Path said, we the Shinkyokushin World Tournament was last month in October. Path, what did you think about the Shinkyokushin World Tournament?
So I watched it live. I think it's interesting to just talk about the world of the sort of political climate and things around it is that it's still very much the two major organizations, despite Shinkyokushin really trying to reach out and do like the JFKO where they try to work with other organizations and bring them in. They do try to be a little bit more progressive, but at the same time, it still ends up being like old head Japan kind of thing. So they did an pay-per-view for the World Tournament, which I thought was a little ridiculous. They didn't try to get a
What is
broadcaster.
that?
They did pay-per-view, so it's like internet pay-per-view, and it's split up by days. So if you wanted to watch the Shinkyokushin World Tournament live, you had to buy like an online digital ticket for day one that was like 5,000 plus yen. And then if you wanted to watch
Oh
day
my
two,
God.
you had to do the same thing. And it was like locked to it was like locked to your account, so like you couldn't trade the ticket. It was almost like if you've ever done E Plus to go to like a concert in Japan where it's like tied to your
Mm-hmm.
phone kind of thing. They did something similar to
Mm-hmm.
that for this. It's just very like to me, I understand they do that for the All Japans and things like that. But this is the World Tournament. It's supposed to be as open to, the world as possible. The one thing they did do is they made it so you could select. I think what you had to do was mark your location as Japan, but it would still accept foreign credit cards, which normally it won't. So there was some concession made to make it work, but it
Mm-hmm.
was still a little bit obtuse. So I ended up buying both and watching them live. It was a really interesting tournament. We talked pretty much all year in most of the shows about how, Evantis Gazauskas was for sure the favorite. That's who we were looking at. He'd won, the European open weight. He'd been destroying everybody. He had already beaten Kembu Iriki in the European tournaments. So we thought, who's going to stop him? And I was
Mm-hmm.
really looking at him as the come up. I think he's in his early 20s still, might be mid 20s. Punches like a mule. He seems to be one of those guys that just has been blessed with the genetics of like iron wrist. A lot of people
Mm-hmm.
who do Kyokushin know, like, when you're throwing body punches, there's no gloves, and more importantly to me, there's no wraps, so you can really hurt your hand badly, if it gets bent while you're throwing punches. But he punches like full power, like almost bringing his hands back behind himself, like a cartoon character when he punches, and he never seems to hurt his wrists. So I think it gives him this ability
Yeah.
to just hit so much harder than everybody else. And he did good. Day one, he demolished his opponents. He was looking good. And his first fight on day two, which I believe would have been fight three. I think they did two fights first, day one,
Mm-hmm.
and then the rest on the next one. He went up against Yuki Okada, who is a very good low kicker and movement fighter, but would have never said he was on his level. And I did clip this one out and send it to Chris because I needed to get his reaction on it. And Gazauskas lost. He lost on the very beginning of day two, which was absolutely shocking. I mean, it has to be said to be the upset of the year. There's nothing else that came close to this. Gazauskas started okay, but Okada just kept smashing his, inside thigh, and he just didn't react at all. He didn't check them. He didn't try to circle out. Gazauskas just seemed stunned by it, and by the end, Okada actually had him backing up and seemed to have actually really hurt him, and ended up winning a decision win over Gazauskas. It was absolutely
Yeah,
bizarre
it
to
was
me.
it was it definitely bizarre. But I think I mentioned it in our conversation when you sent me the clip was that, and I certainly noticed it when I watched the tournament on YouTube, which you can, if you had waited like 3 or 4 days, they posted the whole tournament on YouTube. But so that's what I did for a little bit. I didn't watch the full tournament because it's like 6 hours long, and to be honest, I of the Shinkyokushin guy in of the two of us, and I don't really care. Um, but it was interesting to definitely get your takes. But I don't know, Gazalskis looked. he looked like sick almost. I don't know whether it was in the first or the second fight. Definitely like in at least two fights, he looked like he had the flu, or he just didn't look like he felt okay, you know. And I think that if that was the case, that of course affected his fight game and his strategy and his overall tournament performance. So that was just something I noticed.
Yeah, I think after you said it, I looked back on it and was like that could make sense. He certainly looked extremely pale. The one thing I noticed though is he just didn't seem to wear leg kicks well at all. Like every time he got hit with one, it seemed like it completely stunned him, like it froze him. So my running
Mm,
theory, I think at this point, was that either he'd injured it on day one really badly or had injured it in training coming into the tournament, because I've seen him take hundreds, literally hundreds of low
yeah,
kicks in the European open weight, and it did nothing to him. I'm talking about from Mazur, from Kembu Ariki, and from
yeah.
Shishchinsky in the same tournament, and he didn't give a shit. So the thought that, middleweight Okada was able to, I don't want to take anything away from him. He had an amazing run, which we'll talk about later, but something just seemed off to me. So yeah, it was a pretty interesting tournament just because, everyone sort of wrote it off. Well, it's going to be, Gazauskas versus Kembu Ariki in the final, and there was a crap ton of upsets in this tournament, so it made it a little more
Yeah,
interesting. Um,
yeah, that's it. And Valery Dimitrov did really well. I mean, he's in his mid 40s now, and he got to the final. He which is amazing to me.
oh yeah, it's absolutely insane. So that'll lead into something else where, so Yuki Okada, who had, it's not that he wasn't on my radar. I knew him as like a really strong, like middleweight to light heavyweight fighter, but I certainly didn't have him as like contender to go all the way. Especially like we were talking about with guys like Dimitri in there. You've got Kembu Ariki. You got Yuta Goto, who has really impressed me, winning a lot of the JFKO tournaments. And the
Hmm.
crazy thing was, um, Yuki Okada had like an historic run because not only did he beat Gazauskas, I believe it was maybe the next fight for him or the one after it. He ended up fighting Yuta Goto, and the same thing happened. But Yuta Goto seemed fine. He didn't seem like he had any injury. He fought really well. They were trading punches like crazy, and even with Yuta Goto, who's very, very tall, he just kept getting in that inside low kick, like perfectly placed right on his
Mm.
back leg. And at one point, he actually blitzed him so hard he pushed Yuta Goto off the stage and let out a
Wow.
huge like war cry at him, which I thought was just crazy for, first of all, a guy who I would have never given a chance to beat him. After he beats Evantis Gazauskas, now he beats Yuta Goto. Sort of came out of nowhere. And I remember at that point in the tournament, I was like, holy shit, is he going to go all the way? Is he going to have a Kenji Midori style, just historic run? And I mean,
Yeah, I mean that would
yeah.
be the perfect organization to do it, right?
Oh,
In
for
front
sure.
of Midori. Yeah.
I mean, he came close. And like you were alluding to, he ended up fighting, I think it was semifinals. He fought Valery Dimitrov, and he ate a really bad axe kick that stunned him, and then he got dropped with a body shot that put him down a Wazari, and he just never came back from it. But he gave a good
Mm.
accounting of himself. He gave Dimitrov a really good fight. There were some other standouts in the tournament that I'd like to mention.
Sure.
David, um, I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name. I'm sorry, I'm not great with Georgian last names, but he had a really, really great fight with Ochiai. Um,
Ooh.
yeah, it was a really back and forth brawl, and it was pretty funny because David's quite small compared to him, so it was a very David versus Goliath fight where they just traded punches like
Mm-hmm.
madmen. And then, of course, Kembu Ariki, the Shin Kyokushin poster boy. He had a really strong tournament. He defeated Ochiai. Again, those stomping low kicks where he seems to almost be rooting you into the ground with the angle of them. He also fought the last Lithuanian hopeful after Avantis exited the tournament, and Zamantis as well got bounced fairly early on. We had quite a few upsets. Kembu Ariki hurt Shizinski really bad with a left hook to the body that seemed to stun him. It didn't result in Wazari, but he definitely started backing up big time. Yeah, I mean, it was a crazy tournament. You had Daiki Kato in there as well, who threw about 6,000 spinning back kicks. He made it pretty far, but I believe he RTD'd out of the tournament because I didn't see him again after the quarterfinals. So I know there was a couple bye rounds because of people not being able to come out, but it was pretty chaotic. They had multiple mats going at the same time, this kind of thing. 27
on the
camera
first
angles.
day.
Yeah.
I hate when they do that.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to keep track, especially because the iPay-per-view streaming site they use doesn't allow rewind. So if you miss something, you just missed it. Too bad. So I had to have my recording software going at all times because you never know when you're going to miss a clip out. But yeah, it was an absolutely wild tournament. They also do a multi-camera setup. So your screen is cut into eighths, and there's one screen is dedicated to just advertisements, which is awful. And then there's really close camera angle, white corner, red corner, and then the stadium view. It's pretty chaotic to follow. I think those were sort of the highlights. There were some pretty great jumping knee knockouts. We didn't get any sort of spectacular rolling thunders like we did last year, but I thought it was a great tournament overall.
So from what I either Pro Kyokushin or one of the the Kyokushin Instagrams kept posting knockouts, and it seemed to be the knee to the chin or to the stomach that knocked a lot of people out. Something I just remembered was that Tsukamoto Norichika's student, Watanabe something, I thought he would go really far in the tournament, but he ended up, I think, fouling out. I think he either punched the guy in the face or something like that, and the guy was unable to continue, and he got disqualified. So that was disappointing. But yeah, do you remember that fight at all?
If that
Yuta,
was that
I
on
think
day
it's
one?
Yuta Watanabe or something.
Oh, Yuta, yeah, Watanabe.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I was watching on YouTube, so it could have been a mix or something. But yeah, the quarterfinals or something maybe.
Yeah, there were two. I don't know the one you were talking about. Yeah, where he kept fouling out. There was another one who fouled out for groin kicks, I believe. So I mean, usually get one or two of those at tournament, but yeah, it's disappointing. I remember Antonio Tasao, very recently, last year, we were talking about too, was sort of a favorite for a tournament and then ended up fouling out. I think when you get into those really big stages, nerves get a hold of you, and you just you're just going crazy, and it just slips away on you. That is very disappointing though. Going on from there, the finals ended up being I wasn't expecting this, but it was Valery Dimitrov versus Kembu Ariki. I think we knew Kembu Ariki was going to make it to the finals, but I really thought it was going to be Gazauskas or Zamantis or one of the sort of new generation Lithuanian juggernauts. And it was a good fight, but like you alluded to earlier, once again, it's not that Kembu Ariki lost. I didn't feel that, but I felt like it was an obvious extension round. We're just getting started. Let's keep going for this final. And of course, they called it immediately for Kembu Ariki. And I don't know if this picked up on the YouTube or if they might have edited it out. But if you watch the iPay-per-view live like I did, it was absolutely deafening in there. It was like an Iranian soccer stadium when they're screaming at the regime guys on the field. You could barely hear anything. They were just booing the shit out of them in the stadium.
Wow.
So, or well, it's not, you know what I mean? It's whistling there.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
yeah, but they were whistling
Yeah,
very loud.
it was kind of disappointing to be honest. Like I saw the clip of the final on YouTube again, and it was pretty disappointing. Like you said, I think we were talking about it off camera or whatever. So I don't know if we talked about it earlier in the pod, but yeah, it, Yuriki he did like r- well. Like I think he definitely, like you said, he didn't lose, but Valeri was like giving it right back to him, and I think this is a style thing between like, especially because I come from the IKO and we had all these rule changes within the last couple years, and they're gonna the new rule changes that we talked about earlier in the year are going to be in play for the world tournament uh, in a couple weeks, but just the style of Shinkyokushin fighters, Valeri in particular, uh, is like famous for sort of like playing the cake game, and then they go chest to chest, and then he does like the heel kick to the thigh, and it doesn't look particularly impressive. Like it looks kind of boring. But you know, when you break it down like that, it's incredibly smart, and you know, he definitely has a strategy. But yeah, yeah, I found it hard to judge that fight like with a definite winner for that particular final, and I definitely think it should have gone at least one extension, but it was Japan, and you know, if they get a chance to give a Japanese guy a world championship, they're going to give it to him. So um, it's sort of Valeri's fault for not making it more of a challenge, I think, because he is in his 40s, and he's been like he's definitely a world champion. I think he might be a two-time world champion for Shinkyokushin. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I think he could have been a little bit more impressive to at least get the extension. Whether he would have won at the end or not is a different story. But yeah, it was incredibly disappointing, at least for me.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it a million times. You kind of get to the point where you got to expect this. I mean, he's not new. Dimitrov has been doing this for so long. He's got to know that if
Yeah.
there's any doubt whatsoever, they're gonna give it to Kemba Ariki, especially as he's the poster boy. It's not even enough that it's a Japan versus Bulgaria thing here in the finals. It's that Kemba Ariki is the guy. He's been picked.
Yeah.
A great example is we talked a couple of years ago when we were doing recaps for the All Japan and the JFKOs, where there was one JFKO I remember where Yuta Goto just straight up beat the living shit out of Kemba Ariki. Like smashed his legs to pieces with leg kicks. Kemba Ariki was going backwards. Like he was just getting demolished. Like it was embarrassing. And they gave Kemba Ariki the win. So you get really stupid situations like this. I've got to say I am getting annoyed now with how much they're favoring Kemba Ariki. I feel like they haven't favored
Mm,
someone in decisions this hard in a long time. Shin Kyokushin specifically, like you had other guys like Mikio Ueda who are pretty heavily protected, especially early on. But
hmm
I feel like this is getting absurd now. My thing is, and I wonder what you think about this. We're talking about the world tournament. It's once every 4 years. Supposed to be whoever wins. This is open weight. This is supposed to be the king of Kyokushin. Um,
hmm
I don't agree with the finals being judged and operating in the same way. Like to me, like the finals should be multi rounds, like baked in to avoid stuff
mm,
like this. Because I remember growing up, the first Kyokushin World Tournament that I was sort of, I don't know, old enough and invested enough to where I wasn't just like going and taking lessons in karate, where I like sort of knew what was happening in the outside world of it.
hmm
Was when Hitoshi Kiyama fought Sergey in the finals. I believe it was the 8th World Tournament for IKO. And I remember like reading a
Yeah,
magazine about it. Yeah, it would have been eighth because the ninth was Everton Peterborough.
2003.
Yeah, 2003. That sounds about right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was like when I was just sort of old enough to really be following it. Especially, it was pretty hard back then because that was like pre YouTube being really huge and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really hard to follow. But I remember reading a reporter's blog back when like blog.com and shit like that was huge
Yeah.
about the finals and saying like, it was obviously supposed to go to an extension, but they immediately gave it to Hitoshi Kiyama. That was like a core memory of Young Path, like reading that write up.
Uh,
And they had the still image of Kiyama throwing an axe kick at him while Sergei was like trying to sidestep it. It was like the cover photo. If anyone else remembers that blog, leave it in the comments. I'd be interested to see.
speaking of Sergei Ozapov, he just showed up in some KWF or KWU, the Senshi one,
Yes.
uh, and he just showed up in one of their posts. So I wonder if he's a Kyokushin Kan guy now, or was for like after he left the IKO.
Yeah, and he
So
did
I
Shinken
wonder if
Shobu. He was a glove guy. Yeah.
yeah. So I wonder if he's gonna start popping up in Senshi and KWU things now. But yeah, it's funny that you mentioned Sergei Azapov. So yeah, I it was a couple weeks ago they like posted him like, oh, remember him? So yeah, so that's cool.
Yeah, it just I feel like you said, it's 2003, which makes me feel ancient. By the way, thank you. But it's been a problem for a long time, right? Like this is something that's been in the sort of dialogue and the journalism about Kyokushin for a while. That Kembu Ariki and Dimitrov had this happen, and then you go all the way back to the eighth with Sergei Osipov and Hitoshi Kiyama, and people felt the same way. It just makes me think like why. I imagine the reason I'd get it was probably like, well, they want that level of control and they want it to be just another
Yeah.
fight in the finals. But to me, it's like, let's do 2 or 3 rounds for the final and then make a decision. If nobody goes down, like why is the finals of the world tournament still operate on this 2 to 3 minute blitz and then you have to make a decision? I don't know. It seems to take away from the gravity and I don't know, the prestige of it, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's certainly an interesting take. I don't know if I fully agree with you, but it is I feel like it is sort of an unspoken rule, at least in the IKO world, that the final is almost guaranteed to go to an extension, whether or not um, it is deserving of one. I think, especially like for like more so like the All American tournaments and some of the ones in Japan. I thought there were definite winners at the end, but they almost always go for at least one extension, if not two. So yeah, I don't. It would be a definite change to the way Kyokushin tournaments are held and put on, and but I don't know if because I said that there have been definite standouts or people deserving of a win at the end of one round in the final. I don't know if I agree fully with you, but it's certainly an interesting thing to think about and talk about.
Yeah, I feel like in the finals it's pretty rare for a knockout as well. Um, the one I
Mm-hmm.
can remember is Jan Sukup being finished by Teixeira with low kicks for the final.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's the only one I can think of off the top of my head. So it tends, like you said, they tend to just give it an extension anyway, unless there's like a Japanese fighter that they just want to give the world title to. I don't know.
Yeah.
I would just like it to be baked in that, okay, we're gonna do at least 2 rounds just so at least they get a chance. But I understand
Yeah.
the point that this is tradition. This is the way it is. Nothing's really going to change with this. But
Hmm.
overall, I think it was a really good tournament. Yuki Okada definitely the standout. When we do year-end wrap-up awards, I think Yuki
Hmm.
Okada is probably a shoe-in for either performance of the year or breakout performance of the year, beating
Hmm.
two legends at a lower weight than them. But yeah, it was a good tournament overall. Just like you said, disappointing final, and then yeah, I guess we should go on to their competitor, the IKO World Tournament, which is still to come.
Yeah. So the IK World Tournament will be in about 2 weeks. So from November 17th through the 19th. Uh, and it's back in the Tokyo Metropolitan Gymnasium. The last World Tournament and the last couple of All Japans were held um, in like a suburb of Tokyo. And it was quite a hike to get there. So I'm very happy that it's back in in the city of Tokyo. So yeah, so uh, couple the draw came out in October, in the beginning of October. So I sent it to Path at the time, and I just sent it to um, him again today. So definitely, like we talked about, like we predicted, they are pitting Nishimura and Eremenko um, for the final. So Nishimura is fighter number one, Zekken number one, and Eremenko is
166.
160. Yeah, so wow. So there's 166 men competing for this tournament. A lot bigger than I thought it would be, given that our discussions over the last year or so about Russian fighters and some of the other countries maybe. So very happy to see that it is quite a big tournament. Um, and yeah, so I have a couple. I would like to point out some of the U.S. fighters
Yeah.
since I am American. Um, and I think Path, we are, since there's no, I don't think there are Canadian men competing in the open weight, but there are a few Canadians competing in the senior divisions and in maybe the women. I have to look again, but we are actually Team North America now. So at like we were in the last tournament, so it's U.S. and Canada together, baby. So but yeah, so I'd like to point out some U.S. fighters and then some friends of at least the New York dojo who are competing in this tournament. So first, according to the draw number, we have Kotaro Zushi. He is um, from the Los Angeles dojo, Zekken number four. So he is a frequent fighter in the All American weight category tournament that is held in Los Angeles every year in January. So I talked about my trip there earlier this year in one of the episodes. So he's a he's a competitor. We have Christian Buffalo from the North Carolina dojo branch. So Christian, of course, is sort of like a was a child prodigy in the world of the IKO. He's been fighting since he was a very little kid. Um, all around the world. He's been to Japan for all Japans, for the world tournaments, for juniors, whatever. But now he's in his 20s, I think now. So, um, and he did phenomenal in the All American weight category tournament in LA this year. So, he let's see who he's fighting actually. So he's fighting a Bulgarian guy who is like what is this in kilograms or what is this? Might be. Oh, so it. Now I just lost my place, but he's fighting a guy who's a lot bigger than him, I think, but in terms of height, but should do well at least. Although they are like the same weight, I guess, 72 and 73 kilograms. Um, then we have Taiga Yanagisawa, who is also from the LA dojo. He's actually from Japan, but uh, fights for America. He was one of the guys I fought in. I've when I competed in LA a couple years ago. He was in my division, and I lost to him. So he's a guy to watch. We have Stan Kondov from he's an ex Kyokushin New York guy. Now lives in near San Francisco, so he's been training on his own out there. But again, did well in LA this year, so he got a spot. Um, he's actually childhood friends with Valery Dimitrov. So Stan's uncle is a Shinkyokushin branch chief. And when they were in Bulgaria together as kids, him and Valery trained under Stan's uncle. Um, so I'm sure he'll be happy to hear about. We'll have good discussions about Valery's performance when we were in Japan together. Um, and then we have Sota Nakano, who is always a presence for the American team on the world stage. So it's good to see him. My friend Luigi, who I'll talk about in a couple seconds, is actually in Nara now with him, with training with Sota for the last couple weeks or so before the tournament. So he's also training with the twins, the Ohata twins, in Kyoto. So he's put in the work, and Sota is definitely, although unfortunately he doesn't do well on the world stage, but he definitely puts up a good fight. So that leads me to my friend and dojo mate and past guest host on this show, Luigi Scarcella. He's a um, three-time All-American champion at the LA tournament and Kyokushin New York black belt. So, like I said, he's currently in Japan training for the last couple weeks before the tournament. Then we have Daniel Milosevic, who is also a All-American champion and for the weight division multiple time, I think. And then he was also either second place or third place in the All American Open tournament here in New York a number of years ago. I think he lost to Antonio Tusso or Alejandro Navarro, one of the two. Um, so he's very good as well. And then we have Karush Ivaji, who is also from the LA dojo, who is also a frequent fighter uh, at least on the American scene and the LA scene, and then was also at the World Tournament the last time, and did okay. I mean, he didn't go very far, but definitely put up good fights. And then just some friends of the New York dojo. We have former New York dojo member Minuk Kang. He is fighting for Korea this time, but has lived and trained in the U.S. for, I don't know, like the last 7 years or so. So be good to see him and support him. And then we also have Mate Badar, whose brother, Bensa, was a Uchideshi here at the New York Dojo in 2016. So I don't think Bensa's making the trip out this time, but I'm quite friendly with Mate, so it'll be good to see him. And he does really well, at least in the European tournaments. He's fought Alejandro and he's fought Patrick Sipien on the European for the European Championships, and just he's a good fighter. So be good to see how well he does on the world stage.
Awesome. Yeah,
Your
it's funny
thoughts,
that they
Path? Yeah.
they combine North America. I mean, there's basically no representation from Canada on the big stage with Kyokushin. We got like one guy, I think, but I think it's just an unfortunate part of there's no grant programs or huge influence of Kyokushin in Canada. So if you're gonna do it, you're doing it on your own. Like you're working 40 hours a week plus training on the side. So it's really hard to compete with some other countries that have avenues and ways to do this full time. You know what I mean? I don't think people understand how big of a
Yeah.
difference that makes.
It's
So that is a roadblock,
yeah, and
the
I
size of a dump truck.
and I think at least um in the 2010s and I guess the late 2000s, the Canadian, at least for the IKO, the Canadian dojos that were producing fighters are no longer with the IKO, so we lost uh, some good Canadian fighters from due to that. Specifically from Montreal and from Vancouver. Each one went to Shinkyokushin and one went to IKO Nakamura. So, um, but yeah, but there is one or two Canadians fighting in the senior division. Uh, so I think I met at least one of the Canadian guys who's fighting senior um, when I was outside of the old Hombu 4 years ago. So I think it's the same guy. So good luck to him. I think his name is Daniel. So good luck to him.
Yeah, I'm looking through the draw. It's an interesting way that they've split it up. So something you mentioned when you first started talking about this, it's just important to note because we have mentioned it all year. So the Russians did not participate in the Shinkyokushin World Tournament, but they are here. Um, there's also just I'm noticing that there's also IKO Ukraine dojos participating, and they are very close in the brackets to each other. So we may have a situation like that. I think it'll be fine, but it's just worth noting in case something does happen. There's a representatives from Israel as well taking part this year. There's no restrictions basically for the IKO one. Everybody is
No,
here that should be here in
and
terms of
there
ranking.
were Russians in the Shinkyokushin World Tournament this year.
In the European, sorry, we
There
talked about this before. I meant the
in the
European
yeah,
open weight.
hmm
Yeah,
yeah.
thank you for the
Yeah.
correction.
So no restrictions.
Yeah,
Um,
everybody is here.
yeah.
I'm looking through. We
So
have all the heavy hitters are here. Andre Luzin. Something that caught my eye is Ilya Karpenko, who is a really
mhm.
really good high ranking fighter from Russia. I haven't seen him in many tournaments in a while. So I'm curious about how they do the draws where like I figure you have to place in a major tournament in order to qualify. And I know obviously he is like a top level fighter, but I feel like it's been a
Yeah.
while since I've seen him either in an all Japan weight or something like that. So I'm wondering how
hmm
he qualified, or maybe it's just on name. He must have fought in a Russian tournament that we must have missed. But it's good to see him back. Um, I think, like you said,
Yeah.
Nishimura
I
Kaito
mean,
is a lock.
you can qualify within your own country, like sort of like how all the American guys did it.
Yeah.
They qualified at the All American Weight Category tournament in January this year. Um, but yeah, I mean, I don't want to say anything bad, but I think Ilya could probably call somebody and be like, "I want to go to Japan," and they'll let him on the team. He's been a contender for quite a while. Same with Kapanadze, so I think he might have had a shoe in.
Yeah. And then so I think looking through the draw, I think it's pretty clear that we are going to get an Arabenko versus Kaito final unless something, a knockout happens or something weird. But I mean, they are this. I
hmm
think the shoe ins. Um, I think I see Igor Zagainov is in the middle of the pack here at
Uh-huh.
43. I think Igor Zagainov, the last world tournament he was in, he was very young. I believe he was like 21, but he high kicked Shohei Kamada, who himself
Hmm.
was like the high kick legend for Kyokushin of this era, of like that 2016 era of like the four aces of the All Japan. He's very tall. He's got insanely good kicks from very short range. He can like be almost chest to chest with you, kick you in the head and knock you out. He underperformed in his last tournament in Russia where I saw him, where he got bounced pretty early, but you never know what's
Hmm.
going on if he was injured or something like that. I think he's someone that'll probably make it at least to the semifinals. You got Andre Luzin, of course, who's the heavyweight champion for like world weight classes. He beat Yuta Takahashi, which broke my heart to win that title. Yeah, there's a lot of really. Antonio Tissau is here representing France. I
Yeah,
remember.
I think it is this might be the last of um sort of the old guard of like the 2010s,
Yeah,
because
everyone here is like
like
late 30s
Ilya's
now.
37,
Yeah.
yeah, so Kapanadze, I mean, uh Luzin is quite young, so we would see him, I think, but I think everyone's just trying to make one last run of it, I think. So which is cool to see. But definitely in 4 years time, I wonder what the draw will look like.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's well put, that this is sort of the last hurrah of some of the 2010s era guys, and maybe the
Hmm.
All Japan aces, like 2016 beginning era, like they're coming into their prime now, like Andre Luzin. Um,
Hmm.
is Shoki? I didn't see Shoki. Yeah, Shoki Arata is here. So that's,
Yeah.
I believe he's the only. So I have the four aces of the All Japan from the 2016 era. So Yuta Takahashi, Shohei Kamada, Mikio Ueda, and now Arata. He's the only one left. And I know for certain, because I follow him on Instagram, that he said this is his last hurrah, because he had taken a break for quite a few years off the All
Hmm.
Japan, and he fought in the last one, and it was only basically to qualify for the world tournament. So that's really cool to see that. Yeah, it's sort of an end of an era. This is really cool, because this is
Same
the
with
era that I paid attention to the most. This was my era basically.
yeah, same with Diogo Silva, who from Brazil. So his his first world tournament was either 2003 or 2007. So, and he's 43. So unless he has plans like Navarro to go until he collapses, this would be his last hurrah as well. But I mean, at 43, to still be fighting regular open weight division is absolutely insane to me. So, kudos to Diogo Silva, man.
Yeah, it's unreal. I've seen him forever. Um, it's funny because I believe he got brutally KO'd in, was it the 11th? It might have been the one that Bulgaria won the world tournament. Damyanov.
Yeah, 2000, yeah, the 11th, so 2015.
Yeah,
I
Ekimov's
was I was at that
brother.
tournament. Yeah, it was brutal. Yeah.
It's just worth noting, because I just passed it, that Maxim Ekimov is in this tournament. I believe it was his brother who did that. Remember we had that screw up that one
We
time where we
had
got the brothers mixed up. Yeah, so,
yeah,
and
that was earlier
they're
in the
not
year.
that far in the brackets, so he may get a chance at revenge, which is really interesting. I also
Let's go,
see,
Diogo.
yeah, for sure, man. Maxim Ekimov, actually, I would think is a dark horse for this, because I remember he won
Mhm.
a really important Russian open weight and a Baltic Cup that had all kinds of killers in it, from Igor Zagainov, Andre Luzin, and Alejandro Navarro. And he got through to the end, and he didn't necessarily fight all of them because of the way the draws broke, but they were all in the tournament, and he came out on top. Maxim Ekimov, he only shows up, here and there in these important tournaments, but every time he does, I think like 2 out of the 3 times he ended up winning. he is really, really good. He doesn't get a lot of coverage. I don't see people talking about him as much as guys like Aramenko and stuff, but I would keep my eye on him. Every time he shows up, he ends up pulling out some pretty crazy upset wins. I think
That was a tournament where the bloody nose threw off Navarro, right? That was the
yeah,
Baltic Cup.
yeah, where they
Yeah.
stopped it for like a tiny bit of blood and like reset everything. That
Yeah.
was
And
really
it threw off
bizarre.
his game. Yeah.
I'd like to give a shout out to some of the guys from IKO Kuwait who will be participating. It's a dojo I've been able to
Hmm.
visit a few times. Really good guys. Omar Aldouaj, who really impressed me when I first saw him. I believe it was the All Japan weight tournaments from the 30s. So I think it was like 31st to
Oh
33rd.
wow.
He ended up competing there, and he made it through the first day and had actually a few good Wazaris with middle kicks. He has a really, really strong left middle kick to the body. Um,
Wow.
really solid fighter. I'm glad to see him here getting a chance. I believe he's up against someone from Spain I'm not familiar with, so I'm not sure what his chances are, but he's pretty close to Okadera Yuki and Goryushkin, so that's going to be an uphill battle,
Yeah.
especially because he's not like a huge fighter. I believe he competed at middleweight, but that's sort of the thing, right? When you're going through this, there's no weight classes, so you're going to get some silly situations. But that's sort of, I believe that's why they added, the new Wazari rules with kicks to the face and things
Hmm.
like that. Is the idea is to give some lighter weight fighters a chance. I believe we've talked about it before, but do you want to briefly explain the changes with like front kicks to the face and things like that?
Yeah, so I know we talked about it in an episode earlier the year, and to be honest, I have really forgotten the exact details, but basically, if you kick a guy in the head and then do zanshin, like do um, you sort of make
The pose, everyone calls it the pose
the
a lot.
pose, yeah, um, uh, you would get at least a wazari for it. But if you were to kick a guy in the head really hard and don't do it and he doesn't really react, then you would not get the Wazari. So you have to do the Zanshin after the hit. Um, and it doesn't have to necessarily be the head, it can be any sort of um, hit uh, is very hard and would hurt the opponent. So you can do that. Um, in my opinion, people do it too much now because they're just looking for the point, sort of, which, in my opinion, has thrown off the game of like the full contact karate thing for me. But yeah, that's basically the new rule now is that you do zanshin after a hard hit.
Yeah, I've seen some situations where it's worked. Like I know Ryonosuke Hoshi, who left IKO to go to K1, lost to a lightweight fighter actually in the All Japan Open one year because he took a
Mhm.
pretty hard front kick to the face and then got zanchined without sort of doing anything. Um, so it does,
Yeah,
yeah.
Zagainov does it a lot to his advantage.
Hmm.
Kovalenko, I think,
Yes.
has tried to use it to his advantage, but I don't know how well it has worked for him. I think he's one of the guys who does it too much.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, so
Yamagami
it's
Daiki as well is as made. He won our
yeah.
prospect of the year, I believe, in 2021. He has a piston
Hmm.
of a front kick that he sort of like makes him, do a teeth count real quick. So it might be even too hard to get, but he's done it a few times too where
Yeah.
he's gotten Wazari. But he did lose to Kovalenko because he tried it, like missed, got the foot caught on his shoulder, and then Kovalenko just like body slammed him into an Ippon trip. So
Yeah. So speaking of sort of, you were talking about smaller guys getting that it being introduced for the sake of the smaller guys. A person who is not small, and I hate to sort of point this out because I do come from a relatively tall family, and it is quite annoying when people point out. Oh, not for me, like because I'm like 6 foot, but I have family members that are 6'3" and 6'6" and stuff like that, and people become fixated on that, and they comment on it, which is not always nice. So, but for the sake of this discussion, we do have Icaro Nascimento from Brazil, who is 7 feet tall. So, and he's sort of in that group with Nishimura Taiga. He has, uh, if he does well, he could potentially fight Antonio. Oh no, he would. Yeah, there's really no one uh,
Yeah, it's
that
gonna
he would like
he
fight
might smoke
immediately.
some
But
of them
yeah,
guys.
yeah, but yeah. So and he came to the All American, and he's just actually my friend Christian Buffalo fought him, and Christian is not a tall guy, so it was sort of like a David and Goliath fight. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see his strategy because he can definitely just use his height and weight to his advantage and kind of just mow people down without too much of a effort. But of course, there's technique, there's power that can always knock down the quote unquote giant, right?
Hmm.
So, um, yeah, so it would be cool to see him fight in the world tournament.
I believe in a previous world tournament, it might have been the last one actually. If we're talking about the same guy, which if we're talking about
It's the same. It's
it's
the
got to
same
be
guy. Yeah.
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 He fought Chiharu Higuchi, who's now a Rise
Oh, yeah.
fighter, who is like 63 kg at the time, I think. And
Yeah.
I mean, it was just ridiculous. Like his head was almost at his crotch. That's how like much taller he was than him. And the funny thing was, Chiharu Higuchi won that fight. So, um,
Yeah, you never know, man. It's all if you can chop the legs, right? I would
I
say
don't
that
think
would
it
be
was
the
any sort of.
strategy for.
It would be, but unfortunately, as far as I remember, that's not how it went. He just fouled out. He just sort of got punched in the head one time's too many and one by
Oh,
default. So it wasn't as
damn.
heroic as it sounds, but it was hilarious.
Damn. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, dude. So Icaro is 204 centimeters, which is like 7 feet tall, and 160 kilograms.
I mean, he
He's the
has to be the
heaviest
biggest guy in
guy.
the tournament, right?
Oh, most definitely.
Yeah.
Height and weight, probably. Yeah. Yeah.
So I
And
think
I don't
other
think he
than
speaks English, so I don't think he'll hear this, but we mean it in the best way.
I think it's interesting. They have it listed here. They have Igor Zagainov listed at 111 kg and Nishimura at 110. I find it hard to. I guess height plays a big role in this, but I have a hard time believing Igor Zagainov weighs more than Kaito Nishimura. Kaito is a very stocky guy. Like he's barrel chested, and Zagainov is pretty slim. But I think, yeah, I
but
think those are the two
he's
biggest
not
next guys.
he's not like in a gi he kind of looks chubby, but like when you see Nishimura doing like so Morty Zenjiro has like used to be the Japan's ace, right? In the Kamada era of the 2010s, right?
Legend, absolute
So
legend.
legend. So he's been posting these like promo videos on Instagram, and he posted one with Nishimura, and Nishimura is looking quite skinny. Like so, he's not he's not a big guy. He's not like a fat guy. So like it wouldn't, and I would imagine Zagainov would be deceptively bigger than he is. I think in terms of weight, so they might almost be the same weight.
Yeah, that's interesting. Their gis seem to be doing
Yeah.
opposite for them. Like you said, Kaito Nishimura's gi makes him look bigger than he is, where it makes the Gainav look slimmer than he is. So they're literally
Hmm.
playing Houdini. Those are these are interesting draws, though. I like the way they've laid this out. They've got tournament favorites about every 5 or 6 spots, so they're not all just
Hmm.
going to fight each other in the first round, which I really like. Kind of sucks if you're like someone from a smaller country that doesn't get to compete in these high level tournaments all the time. You're probably just going to get slapped, but that's sort of the nature of the game,
Yeah,
right? We always know what day two
that
is going to look like.
I kind of like. I would never want to be the because I would, to be honest, because I know it would be me, right? Like it would be the although the U.S. has quite a number of decent fighters, right? But like like you were saying, Kuwait and like well, South Africa is pretty good, but like some other countries, man, like it I love going on the first day because you just see like Nishimura just plow through
Mm-hmm.
like a Sri Lankan guy. No offense to Sri Lanka, but like for
Well,
example,
yeah,
right?
it's a lesser
And it's just
developed
like
region
it's
for
so
this
funny
sport.
to me,
That's all.
like
Yeah.
yeah. And it's because you just see like guys who are very unprepared for what they signed up for get like demolished.
I don't see any Pakistan representative, right? I only saw India. Is that
Yeah,
one
I
in the
don't think
list?
we might have lost um
Because that was sort
our
of a
branch
running,
there.
yeah, that was sort of a running. I don't know if you want to call it a meme, but there was like 3 world tournaments in a row where there was a single representative from Pakistan, and there was this weird thing we've talked about on the show before, where there was almost seemed to be like a miscommunication. Like the
Mm,
representative didn't understand the rules, because I distinctly remember, and I've gone through, I literally pulled out all my Media 8 DVDs and went through them desperately trying to find this fight. If anyone knows what the one I'm talking about, please post the name of it in the comments, because I would love to make a compilation of this, where every year it would be like India or Pakistan. The representative from there would alternate, where they would walk up, do the bow, they'd start, and they'd get punched once, and they'd back up and like wave it off, like with their both hands, like whoa, whoa, whoa. And it wasn't like I'm hurt, I quit. It was more like, what's
mm-hmm.
going on here? It's almost like they thought they signed up for a point tournament. Like it was really bizarre, and it happened
Yeah,
multiple times. So I'm really curious. Is there some language barrier they didn't understand, like the rules? But yeah, it's interesting. I don't
yeah,
see them this time. I was kind of hoping for a four-peat.
yeah. There's one guy from Bangladesh, Gomez Matthew Ricky,
Mm-hmm.
but I think he lives in Japan because he's fought throughout
Yeah,
the
I
pandemic. He
recognize his
fought,
his name. He's
yeah,
actually a pretty good fighter. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. He fought in like the All Japans during the pandemic, so I think he lives there.
Okay, so let's get down to brass tacks on this then, because I think we could wax poetics on just how awesome and how layered this tournament is. I
Hmm.
think people have gotten a sense of the scale and how many awesome fighters are in this. Let's pick brackets first. So on the first, when we're looking at the top page, Nishimura Kaito's sort of bracket, and then Andre Luzin at 83. We'll call that sort of the end of that like A B bracket. Who do you
Okay.
have coming out of that, or who do you have as the semifinals of that?
Nishimura. Let's see. Nishimura, Navarro, uh, Navarro. Um, maybe one of the Ohatas, probably Reiji,
Yeah.
and I don't want to count out my countrymen, but I, I unfortunately don't see them
It's a hard pick,
going to
yeah.
the semifinals, but
Yeah.
I hope they do. So yeah, yeah, I would say losing one of the Ohatas and oh no, yeah, losing one of the Ohatas, probably Reiji and Eremenko, I'm sorry, Navarro and Nishimura.
Yeah,
What you?
that makes perfect sense to me. I think
Yeah.
Kaito Nishimura is a shoe in on that side of the bracket.
Hmm.
I like Karpenko, because I'm looking at like the brackets that lead up to the top on that side. I think Karpenko looks
Hmm.
good. And then yeah, I would say Maxim Ekimov and yeah, Luzin are other shoe-ins to make
Mm.
it far. I would pick Ekimov over Luzin, I think,
That's
if they
true.
end up fighting, just because anytime I've bet against him, he's shown up big. And I think he, unlike other fighters that sort of do the opposite, I think he shines when it matters. I've seen Ekimov get bounced in sort of lesser tournaments that didn't matter as much, but when it's like the Baltic Cup or like the lights are on and everybody's here, he seems to pull magic out. I think he's an absolute whirlwind. Um,
Hmm.
the thing is,
And that's true.
yeah,
We and we've talked about losing in the past, just how over the last couple years he's sort of
bit inconsistent.
slowed down, I
Yeah,
think. Yeah. So I think he might have like that Kapanadze syndrome where he like just gets beat up and then he just can't do it anymore. Where like Kapanadze gets beat up and then go places like third or fourth. I don't think Luzin will be like that, unfortunately. So Ekimov would probably beat him.
yeah, I think that's a fair look at the brackets. My thing is, I would actually, in a completely fair, objective world where it's some, I don't know, like kickboxing judge who doesn't give a shit about the organization stuff, I would actually kind of, if you just had Kaito and Ekimov fight, like irrespective of the tournament, of how the brackets are going to play out, of
Uh-huh.
stamina, I would I would like Ekimov's chances in that fight. I don't know if that's going to play out well in terms of, it seems like he has a pretty hard run.
100%.
Yeah, he
I
might end
I
up
would
judging
pick
it again.
Ekimov off the bat
Yeah,
against Nishimura. To be honest,
yeah. So
I
we'll see
just
how
think
that
he's a
plays
more
out.
technical fighter. He's stronger. I would say, like just in terms of like kicking power. I
Mm-hmm.
think getting hit by him is the equivalent of getting hit by a truck. So whereas Nishimura is a bigger guy and he knows how to use that to his advantage, but I don't think he is as technical as Ekimov can be.
No, and he was just like a
Yeah.
bulldozer style, right? And he's actually,
Hmm.
you told me before, he actually got in trouble even after winning a tournament. Like the first thing they said to him when he got off the mats was like, "You're not going to be able to
Don't
do that
push.
next time." Yeah, the
Yeah.
pushing, the two hand pushing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
He's
then
gotten better, but it's certainly it is very surprising to me that he is sort of like the the one they're pushing. But we've talked about that before.
yeah, I think yeah, and I've said my
They
piece
just
many
don't have
times on
anyone.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
the four aces of the All Japan era kind of ended without sort of a clear line to the throne. And I feel like most of their,
Mm.
like you said, like the Ohatas, Yamagami, Daiki, Takagi Shin, these are all guys we've given Prospect of the Year to on various
Hmm.
years, but they're all middleweights, right?
Hmm.
They're not the big guys. So
And
looking at
like
the
we've said before, like on different episodes, the Japanese team tends to get pushed out either in the quarter or the semifinals. So they
mm-hmm.
have a certain amount of standouts that make it to the semifinals and then maybe like get third or fourth. I think Ueda was a standout before, like that he made it all the way. Uh, but yeah, at least in the 2010s,
Yeah,
the Japanese have made it to the quarterfinals and the semifinals, and then they've just got beaten by the Russians.
yeah, I remember specifically the last World Tournament. Um, Yuta Takahashi made it really far and then lost to Aramenko, I believe, in this. Might have been
Mm-hmm.
semis. Yeah. And Shohei Kamada, who I thought would make it really far, got high kick knocked out by Igor Zagainov. We talked about um,
Mm-hmm.
Shoki Arata also got bounced by a Russian. So, yeah,
Yeah.
that tends to happen. And then it's like the guy they're pushing the hardest sort of makes it through.
Yeah. How about let's move on to the second page.
Mm-hmm.
So from Kovalenko down to Eremenko. What do you think? Who do you
I mean,
think will make it far?
my knee jerk is that that's perfectly placed. Like Kovalenko
Mm-hmm.
and Eremenko on the other side of the brackets. We have seen them fight finally. Once COVID lockdown ended, we did get that match. Because I'd always
Yeah.
wondered, Kovalenko can't match Eremenko's power, his technique, his unbelievable combinations, his sickle kick from like point blank. I mean, the guy is
Mm-hmm.
a legend. But my one question mark was, could he sweep him? Because the rules were pretty new at the time, and we got the answer that he could not. And as you'd mentioned
Yeah.
before, and we talked about before, Kovalenko, was a sweep machine during lockdown, and then they kind of just disappeared. I don't know if people figured him out or if he stopped relying
Mm-hmm.
on it as much, but he went from literally sweeping his way all the way through the tournament in the first, I think it was the 2020 All Japan, to, he was back to sort of fighting more traditional since then. I still think Kovalenko is really good. I think he has stamina trouble, like long term, because he is a really big guy. Like coming down into the semifinals and things like that, he does seem to gas a little bit. But I still think, like, I like his chances. When I'm looking at other guys in his brackets, like uh, Daniel Gershkin, I'm seeing
Yeah.
Antonio Tasao. Like, those are really good fighters, but I think Tasao specifically, I like that guy a lot. But we've seen
Yeah.
many times, like we've talked about, fouled out in this last big chance in an All Japan.
Yeah. He doesn't do well in Japan,
Yeah, for
unfortunately.
some reason, yeah. I don't
Yeah.
know if it's the bright lights or like he's psyching himself out, but he performs way better in Europe traditionally. He looks like a killer in Europe, and then he looks like like he can make it to the quarterfinals in Japan
Yeah.
most times, but can't seem to push through to the. So I wouldn't. And then Nishimura Taiga, I think, has a good look, but again, I don't see him beating either Eremenko. I like Shoki Arata a lot. Like we said,
Yeah.
an All Japan ace, really amazing low kicks. Another like bulldozer type fighter like Nishimura, but I don't see him beating Kovalenko, and I don't see him beating Eremenko. So I think those two for sure. And then dark horse pick, I think I'd have to go with. Yeah, this bracket seems a little more spread thin on terms
Yeah.
of that stuff. I think Nishimura Taiga would be my dark horse pick
Mm,
because of his back leg low kick.
yeah. Yeah. That's a good. Yeah. I would agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I. So
So that's the open weight one.
yep.
Um, for the women, I don't know if you're too familiar, but basically they're setting up
I know
who's
Nanami, but that's like the
yeah,
most I know about that one.
they're setting up Uzawa Nana and
Sato
Sato
Nanami.
Nanami.
Yeah.
I think Uzawa is the reigning world champion for the women. I think she
Mm-hmm.
beat Nanami the last time.
Yeah, it was a board
But
break, I believe.
yeah, so that's what they're like putting forth. But standouts for the women, unfortunately, like I have said in the past, I am not too like tuned into the IKO women. But some standouts that I am familiar with are Layla Polak from Hungary, um, Shinez Al Hamour from France, and let's see who else. There are a couple Russians that I always get confused between who they are, so I won't name names. um, but and then there's a one American girl. She's actually Sota Nakano's sister, Rie Nakano. So she's in the open weight division for the women. Um, yeah,
I
Path,
think
do you have anything to say about the?
I just, I know Nakano Rie, I know Sato Nanami. Sato Nanami for a long time seemed like the face of IKO women's division. I like her chances as long as she doesn't. She's very small though, so as long as she doesn't go to, board break, I think she'll win.
Mhm.
I like her chances a lot. She's just a speed demon. Literally doesn't need to breathe. Like it's unreal.
Sure.
She never. Um, so I think Sato Nanami wins for women's, but for men's, we need to pick a winner. Who do you think like goes home with it?
I'm gonna say Eremenko, man. It's just it's. I think this is his last run, and I think this is his tournament.
I tend to agree. My only fear is sort of a Kembu Riki, Japan decision for Kaito Nishimura. But I'm
Yeah.
gonna I'm gonna choose to be optimistic today. I don't know why, and just say Eremenko is gonna take this. I think they seem to really like Eremenko in the organization. They've sort of done a lot to
Hmm.
get him moving around and bringing him to Japan all the time. So I choose to believe that they're not gonna you know screw him over on that. I think he'll get fair judging. So yeah, Eremenko I think is the clear choice.
Do you have a third? Do you have a third? Uh, so if it's Eremenko Nishimura,
Mm-hmm.
do you have a third place?
Ekimov, unless the brackets can't break
Ekimov.
out that way. But I think no
Hmm.
one's gonna beat him except one of the two mentioned.
Yeah, I would agree. I might argue for Zagainov.
Yeah, for sure.
I've alluded to that he's he's my boy, so I think uh, I think he might, if given the chance, he would place third. I think.
Yeah, I mean that's totally fair, and he seems to do well in the world tournaments. He's
Yeah.
definitely one that like has a chance for upsets against like Japan's top guys too, because even if you want to claim biased decision, like a lot of the times he'll just knock them out with a high kick, and there's no need for judges. So I think yeah,
Mm-hmm.
he's a really has a really good look as well.
Good. So I think that's it for the IKO World Tournament. Do you have any thing else to talk about?
No, I think we've pretty well covered it. I mean, it's just an amazing year for Kyokushin to have this many world tournaments. It's interesting that I would have said that it's strange that even though all these organizations were founded on different dates, their 4 years, every 4 years world tournament all line up. But I think that's a matter of all these organizations vying for legitimacy to have them on the same anniversary from the first one before the splits, right? So it ends
Mm-hmm.
up being a pretty
Mm-hmm.
crowded year, but I mean it makes for good viewing, and I'm really looking forward to watching it. We will be covering the tournament live, at least day two for sure. We will be covering live on the Twitter, so if people want to check it
Yeah.
out, and that's it for me. Unless you have anything else you want to add, Chris.
No, like I said at the beginning, please follow the Dojo Explorer blog and Instagram. So Dojo underscore Explorer. I'll be bopping around Japan, exploring different dojos and profiling them. Also, follow me on my main, I guess, Instagram, IchigekixEdge, for more, I guess, well-rounded content. So not only martial arts, but for tea and for just Japan in general. Um, please give me a follow and like and subscribe on YouTube for this channel if you're watching, or if you're listening, please follow us on Spotify.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you after the World Tournament for a recap. Us.
Os.